Hey everyone, this is Ryan Mitchell from thetinylife.com coming to you today with an update. We finally got the roof on and I wanted to kind of give you guys a quick tour of it. This is a standing seam metal roof, which is kind of defined by the ribs right there, okay? And what I like about, I like the look of it. It's hard to tell here in the video because of the glare, but this roof matches exactly my windows. And it took a long time to figure out how to find a manufacturer that could match it. We got lucky and one of them had a stock color that matched almost identically. Wanted to go into some of the parts here real quick. First off, I guess I should say that I had this professionally done. I started doing it myself and I quickly realized that it was pretty much out of my depth, mainly because of the metal bending, and there was just some tools that I didn't have, and it ended up with a lot of questions even when I kind of picked the brain of someone that had done it before. I did decide to hire. If I was using just like a corrugated roof, I think it would be easier, and if I didn't have the Skylight there, or up front here I'll show you is a dormer. If I didn't have that, then I probably wouldn't have to hire anyone. I could have done it myself, but those were two tricky parts. So getting up close here, kind of zoom in. Hopefully you guys can see this. All right, right there. So right at the edge there, you can kind of see how there's a shadow, and that's called the drip edge. If there is water that comes down on near the wood, it kind of directs it out away from the house, and that then goes into the actual standing seam. One little thing that I like to point out is you can kind of see, it's hard to tell, but they actually folded a piece of the rib over around the edge. It just makes it look a lot cleaner. Then also they fabricated this special piece here for the Skylight, and you can see how the Skylight is kind of a little bit elevated off of it. And then we'll back up here. See up there's actually a solid piece, and the reason for that is that if we kept on with the ribs up there, then we would have a big seam. So we did one continuous piece to span the top of that. Okay, and now we can see up here this top piece. It's called the ridge cap, and that just kind of tops everything off. There we have a hip cover, and that's just basically over here. You can kind of see that just covers the hip. And then over here is the dormer, and so you can kind of see the color now a little bit better. But if we zoom in, okay, we have a valley here, and you can kind of see how they did that, put that together. Basically, there's a piece that's designed for valleys, and what it's doing is it's a single contiguous piece, because that's the low point right there in that where those two parts of the house come together. And so we want one contiguous piece so that we don't have a seam where the water can get in. So that, you can't see it, but that piece of metal actually extends underneath that part of the roof and up on that part a good 6 inches, so that if water were to kind of get up in there, it would have to go really far away to get to the actual thing. That is a end wall piece, and that's basically in this instance where you have the roof going into a flat wall right here, and so you can see how far it goes up. We're going to obviously cover this, but the metal goes much higher than it needs to, just in case water were to like splash back or kind of get drawn up in underneath the siding. It would still kind of protect the wood. And then we also did it up there, and let's see, you can kind of see at that little peak there, and you can see the end parts of the ridge cap there, how they kind of trimmed them off. We'll go over the other side here and I'll show you that part. Okay, so this is, you can start to get a feel for the house now. and it looks really great. I haven't finished that last little bit up there at the very peak, the siding, but I think this roof is looking great. I'm really excited about it. And you can see right there's they also did a drip edge. Maybe we can get a better, yeah. You can see how it's kind of bent out like that. And one of the nice things about hiring someone is they have all the tools to bend these things. So I was able to buy the flat sheets of this metal in the color I wanted, and then they just fabricated this for me. And they could do that for much less than it would cost me to buy it from the manufacturer that way. And then it was custom, so it fit better. So that was a nice little thing. Alright, so I want to talk about the Skylight specifically. This is a Velux Skylight, which seems to be a general consensus, the best brand out there. There's a couple other brands out there that are kind of the budget brands, but you don't save a whole lot of money, and I've just heard not good things about them. There's one other brand that's kind of okay, I don't remember their name, but Velux is kind of the go-to. Skylights are notorious for leaking. Alright, so you can see we did some special flashing. This was in conjunction with the flashing kit that comes with, made by Velux, which does not come with a Skylight. So that's a thing to know. You have to pay extra for the Skylight, and it is expensive, and so is the Skylight. You can't just install the Skylight itself. It doesn't come fully ready to go. You actually have to buy the particular flashing kit that you want for your situation separately, and they don't tell you that unless you just happen to know. So you can see we did a single flat piece of metal up top there. You see there's no rib, and that just keeps the number of seams down and just helps us. Okay, so one thing I'll point out is, and you may not be able to see, but you see right there where it goes from the flat part up into the Skylight, that's actually bent. There's no seam there, and that's really important. And that actually that metal extends up about another inch into the flashing kit, so that if water were to work its way up or bounce or splash or whatever up in there, it won't do that. It's kind of, I can't talk you exactly through the top part of how they flash that. It's kind of a similar situation, but the basic thing is here, we want to work our way from the bottom up, because water works its way down. We want to think like a raindrop is kind of the mantra, and so we work from the bottom up, so that the top layer is always going over the bottom layer, so water as it runs down doesn't have an opportunity to work back. We also want to reduce the number of seams that are present, so more seams mean more points for water to get in. And then we also want to extend the metal beyond what we think we'll really need, just for the extra insurance. And then at the very last line of defense is caulk. So like silicone or whatever is really, you should never rely on it. It is a complete backup, because honestly it's going to degrade after several years, and you can go up there and replace it, but it should only be a kind of secondary or tertiary backup to your metal work. Hey everyone, this is Ryan Mitchell from thetinylite.com. Before we get into the main video, I wanted to talk to you about some of the details, some of the things that you probably wouldn't readily notice if you weren't an experienced person when it comes to roofing, which most of us aren't. That's probably why you're watching this video. And when it comes to tiny houses, it's very similar to regular houses, but we're going to talk about how I put a metal roof on my tiny house. So first off, when you're dealing with roofs, you want to think like the water drop, okay? And that sounds really cheesy, I know, but when I first heard it, I laughed and was like, yeah, okay, right, the water drop, sure. But then I was out of my house and I was doing things, especially with this, when I first was getting the flow of this with the siding, and I kind of didn't realize, but I said to myself, be the water drop. And it helped me really understand how everything had to go together with the siding and then later the roof, because it's true. If you think of how the water flows
in general, and when it comes in contact to your house, you can then glean how things have to go together in what order. And so from this, we understand that water goes from a high point to a low point, and that when we're putting our layers on, whether it's shingles or siding or whatever the case is, we want to start at the bottom and then work our way up. And the reason for that is when we put something on the bottom, then we add our next piece up top, and it covers it. So as the water goes down, it doesn't have a chance to get back up into that, because the top piece is going over the bottom piece. So we always want to work from the bottom up, and that's really important when it comes to anything. Gravity is our friend here, and we want to maximize how it's used. And so I opted for a metal roof, and I wanted to first talk about why I did that. There are several options out there for roofing, but honestly, for a tiny house, metal roof is kind of the go-to thing. I used a standing seam, and I'll talk about what that means here in a second. But the metal roofs are particularly good because A, they last a lot longer. Most of them have a lifetime or a ridiculously long number of years in terms of their warranty. I like the aesthetic of them, just how they look. They're also very durable, and when it comes to tiny houses, probably one of the more key points is that they are particularly good at handling high wind loads, which is very important with tiny houses, because inherently tiny houses get moved around because they're built on trailers, a lot of them at least. And when you're going down the road, if you're on the highway, you're going 60, 70 miles an hour, and that's a lot of wind to have to deal with for your house, and especially your roof. And so the metal roofs are particularly good at handling those high wind speeds, and they even have like special standards for Florida, which most of the standing seam metal roofs use, because they're such a hurricane prone area. And if you think about it, you driving your house down like a major highway is similar to like a low to mid-size hurricane. Honestly, you're going 70 miles an hour. That's a lot of wind for your home to have to endure. So my roof is a standing seam roof, and what that basically means is that they come in panels, and each panel has a flat part in the middle, and then each side there's these ribs that stick up, usually like an inch or two. And what they do is that's where you make your seams on those upper parts, because it's away from that bottom part. So here's where the water's going to be running, and here's your rib where the seam is going to be made, where the connection is. And so my panels are 16 inches wide, and on the seam, or the rib, it comes up, one is like this, and then the next piece that goes over it comes over and it clasps it like this and kind of locks it in. And so it's a really tight fit there. If you were to Google it, you could get some good pictures, but that's the basic concept. And then also where this comes up, there's like this flange that sticks out where you, on mine at least, you put all your fasteners, and that's what's called a hidden fastener roof. So as a point of comparison, a hidden fastener versus kind of like a standard exposed fastener roof. And the reason why I decided to go with hidden fastener is because that all those fasteners are not exposed to any water, because like I said, the flange is here, and then the next piece comes over and covers it. And so your screws are down here, but the water can't even get to it because it's completely covered. And it means that you have a contiguous piece of metal that is, doesn't have holes in it. Now, compared to the other type where you lay down your metal and then you actually drive screws through the metal into your roof deck, and that seems kind of ludicrous to me, because what you're basically doing is compromising your roof. And they do have these special screws that have these rubber washers, and then you can also add some compound or glue or whatever sealant to the hole. But honestly, that is the washer. I've seen a lot of pictures and YouTube videos where they show that washer degrading, and sometimes as little as 1 to 2 years, as up to 5 years. But after 5 years, you'll go up on these roofs and you'll see all these screws that they look like they kind of worked their way out, but what actually happened was there used to be a rubber washer there that just completely disintegrated, and so it looks like all the screws are out like 1/4 of an inch because the washer's no longer there anymore, and that just makes a big hole in your roof. So I think it's kind of a silly thing. It's kind of an older thing. The hidden fasteners are definitely gaining popularity, but it's something that you should really consider when you're choosing a metal roof for yourself. Let's see here. Whatever you do, you should always have where, especially in key places where there's going to be a lot of water coming in, it's always best to have a contiguous piece, to not have seams. You want to reduce the number of seams, you want to reduce the number of holes that you have in your roof, and there's some, and you can tell the quality of a roofer because the bad ones will say, oh, we'll just put a bunch of caulk there and it'll be fine. Whereas a good roofer will organize and plan out ahead so that there's no seams there at all. They'll go extra length to make sure that they're not relying on the caulk or the sealant to keep out the water. So basically, you want to have solid contiguous metal handling the water, not having sealant do it. The sealant's there as kind of like a backup, a worst case scenario, because that stuff degrades over time too. So you always want the metal to handle the water, not your sealant. The other thing I'll talk about is the parts. And I go over this a little bit in the video, but quickly, there's a lot of parts when it comes to metal roofs. I was really surprised and kind of overwhelmed. For me, I had a ridge cap, which goes over the very top, a Z closure, which is basically this piece of metal that closes gaps. When you have your ribs, if you put a piece of metal on top, there's a gap right here, and so the Z closure goes in there, and that's what they're usually called because it's a Z shape. Then my panels were 16 inches wide, and the ribs were 1 inch tall, just for kind of point of reference. Then there's a valley, which is basically where the roof comes in together like this. And the trick with this is you want a single piece in that valley. You don't want any seams in that because the water is just going to rush in right there, and in many cases sometimes sit there if it's a lot of water or if it pools somehow or something like that. And then you have an end wall piece, which if you have like a wall and the roof has to go in like this, it spans the distance between that. And then finally the hip roof is where the edge of a roof comes down. It covers the hip of that. It's just a cover for that.